Hello everyone, I'm Julie. I work for the Museum of Decorative Arts and Design. Welcome to this exhibition, Playground, the Design of Sneakers. Well, confinement doesn't mean we have to stop cultivating ourselves, so let's take a tour of the exhibition together in English, but with some help on your screen, you'll see. So nowadays, lots and lots of people wear sneakers. No matter our age, our gender, our social background, this shoe has convinced almost everyone. So have you ever asked yourself why? Where does the sneaker come from? So let's see that together. Why don't we start with the history of the sneakers fabrication? It all begins in the 1830s in England. This shoe was designed to take seaside walks because the sole made of rubber was very flexible and perfect to walk on rocks and near water. But little by little, manufacturers realized it was also a good shoe to practice sports because of this rubber sole, very flexible, and the upper fabric part. In 1839, a scientist named Charles Goodyear invents the chemical process of vulcanization. Vulcanization is heating the rubber in the presence of sulfur to make the rubber sole stronger and more elastic. This way, the rubber sole is resistant to all temperatures. And at the same time, rubber soles start to be mass-produced in English factories, and it corresponds to the period we call the First Industrial Revolution. At the turn of the 20th century, manufacturers become more and more involved in the production of shoes specifically for sportsmen, designed for competition. Let's talk about the sports design. Here, every sneaker that you see is different and looks different because it was conceived according to the needs of the sport. For instance, for football shoes, the soles are equipped with cleats. We call these shoes football boots or rugby boots. Here you have models used in the fields of athletics, so sprinting, marathons, pole vaulting. You can see that the spikes under the sole are very long because the faster you run, the more grip you must have. And just below, you have the models we use today for the Olympics. The spikes are smaller because tracks on which we run have evolved too. Sneakers become the emblem of the sportsman's success. In New York in the 1970s, lots of young people identify with basketball champions, for example. And the champions representing success, the young people want to be as successful as their idols, and to do so, they must wear the same sneakers. And in the 70s, wearing sneakers outside of the sports field is considered unconventional. So these young people start wearing sneakers as a sign of rebellion. In some areas of New York, like in Harlem, in Brooklyn or the Bronx, young people and different people from different origins are often poor and discriminated. That's why they wear this shoe as a sign of rebellion, and they cannot buy several pairs of shoes, so you only have one that you must fix, that you have to customize, so it represents your taste, your cultural identity. At the same time, the hip-hop culture was born. In the middle of the 1970s, on the playground, people played basketball, but they were listening to the beginnings of rap music, MCing, DJing, and young people also tried new dance moves. It was the beginnings of breakdancing. The hip-hop culture did a lot for the industry of sneakers. A lot of rappers, for example, wrote songs about their own pairs, the Air Force Ones, the Air Jordans, but also the superstars. In the 1980s, the Run DMC, the rap band, wrote a song called My Adidas to promote this famous sneaker, the Adidas Superstar. Actually, they were the first singers, non-sportive men, to sign a sponsorship agreement with a sports brand. So it was really a turning point in the history of hip-hop and in the history of the sneaker industry. So in English, we say sneakers, but in French, we say les baskets. Why do we say les baskets? Maybe because basketball influenced so much all over the world that it transformed the way we speak about our shoes. Here you have a white Chuck Taylor All-Star. Can you imagine playing basketball with a Converse shoe? Because I don't. In the 1950s, all the sports brands we know today did not exist yet. But in 1949, when the NBA was created, well, Converse was already here. And Converse became the official brand to furnish professional basketball players. At the time, basketball was played, professional basketball at least, was played in universities, so in gymnasiums with parquet floor. And Chuck Taylors were good enough because this type of wooden floor already absorbs the shocks. But when basketball starts to be played in the streets, on tarmac, well, brands and designers had to create a new shoe with a sole cushioning shocks. By the 1980s, sneakers became collected objects, just like artworks, and we call the people who collect them sneakerheads or sneaker addicts. And every sneaker addict knows the famous online reseller today, StockX. Of course, there are many ways to find rare sneakers and to make your collection grow, but StockX is different. It works like stock market. So the price of a pair changes every day depending on the demand and depending on factors like if the sneaker is old, if it was worn by someone famous, or if it was released in limited edition, etc. In the 1980s also, Air Forces and Air Jordans were among the trendiest models, and they still are today. The Air Force One was designed by Bruce Kilgore in 1982. This shoe was given first to a select group of basketball players, but people from Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York fell in love with the shoe. The Air Force One was released during a time of social tension, especially in New York. And by the end of the 1980s, dealers start to wear Air Force Ones. And they are the ones who dictate the trends in New York, in Harlem especially. The trend at the time is precisely white and new Air Force Ones with monochrome tracksuits, for example. Fun fact, Nike only intended for the shoe to have a short life because 2 years after its release, it was already retired, but fans demanded its return, and a group of independent stores approached Nike, who finally agreed to restart production. So 35 years later, the model Nike almost killed is still one of the most loved. In 1985 then comes the first Air Jordan, still famous today, from the collaboration between Nike and Michael Jordan. There were two major designers on the Air Jordan line. The first one is Peter Moore. He's the one who designed the first shoe, the first Air Jordan, and the second one. And he also designed a logo that we know well, the Jumpman logo. Then he was replaced by Tinker Hatfield, who designed the Air Jordan 3 and many others of the line after that. So I spoke a lot about the Air Force, the Air Jordan, so it's time to talk about the Air technology. The Air technology was developed by aeronautical engineer Marion Franklin Rudy, and not for sneakers at first. It was conceived as a protection system in astronauts' helmets, and then it was suggested as a cushioning system to different brands before being selected by Nike in 1977. So the first shoe to have the Air technology is not the Air Force, is not the Air Max, it's actually the Nike Tailwind, released in 1978, which was a running shoe. This technology consists in air bubbles pressurized in the sole, which creates an incredible cushioning system. Of course, the famous sports brands don't work alone. They work with research laboratories and also chemical giants to find new technologies and create a more performant and more innovative sneaker every day. So let's look at one example of the sneaker of the future. So here you have a research project by Puma and the MIT, but also with a company called BioRealize. They have worked on a project called the BioRealize breathing shoe. So you see here the shoe and its evolution with time. In the upper part, they inserted bacteria which react to heat, to hot temperatures. The more you run and produce heat, the more the bacteria will grow and destroy the material. The shoe disintegrates. The sole is connected. It collects the kilometers you traveled, your well-being state, but also your level of fatigue. For now, it's just an experiment, but maybe in a few years you could buy this shoe. So earlier I told you about the rubber industry. Nowadays, the sneakers we wear are mostly made of plastic. Brands are developing new ways to produce sneakers, and 3D printing is one of them. So 3D printing can be used to make made-to-measure shoes for a specific athlete, for example, but it's becoming more and more popular because it is cheaper and faster than the traditional modes of production, and it also allows innovation and experimentation with new materials, new shapes, etc. I spoke a lot about plastic because it's true that the sneakers we wear today, Nike, Puma, Adidas, etc., are essentially made of plastic on which we use chemical solvents, so all this is very polluting. And there's another problem, the production sites. Do you know that 6 sneakers out of 10 are produced in China? The rest is mainly produced in Southeast Asia, where the workforce is even cheaper than in China. So brands have a lot of work to do to change this way of producing sneakers. And us, consumers, must think about what we buy and how we consume. Is plastic the right material for our shoes when in 2050 it is said that there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean? Fortunately, there's innovation here too. For example, the brand Veja only produces in Brazil to reduce its carbon footprint. And Veja guarantees its workers good work conditions and good salaries. There's also an interesting made in France brand named Corail. Corail works in Marseille with local fishermen to recycle plastic waste. With this transformed plastic waste, they fabricate the entire sneaker from the sole to the laces. The design is great, it's all recycled material, and the price is reasonable. So why not try? Well, that's it for the visit. I hope you liked it. Dear students, we will have a chat very soon, so prepare your feedback and your questions, of course. That's it for now. Bye!